Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Um, so this video is the start of our series, our second series on Plato. Well, our third series on Plato and our second series on Plato's Republic. Um, but it's kind of also, for multiple audiences. Um, some of these videos are for my students and some of them are for just anybody listening to the podcast. I want to make them available not only in easy format to my students, but also um, widely available to anybody who wants to learn because I think the ideas are important and I think the world will be better if more people know these things. So that's why I do what I do. Um, but I'm really excited because I updated the code on my website. I have a personal website, hilljay.net, and it's through GitHub pages, through some software that I learned, Jekyll. And I've been messing with it for a few years here and there. Anyway, instead of having to upload instead of my students having to go to YouTube or having to go to some kind of tracking software, um, to make sure they were actually watching it, now they can just, listen to it in whatever format works best for them. And it's there on the website. If you go to the right place, you should be able to find it. And right now it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I don't think I'll put it on Amazon, which means it won't go on Audible. It would be on Audible if I was going to put it on Amazon, but I don't. Um, I'm sure that I will continue to move away from major distributors as things continue to change in our world. What excites me a bunch about doing it from the website is that it's there and it's mine and it's stable. It's super easy for me to update. So that is just a quick update on how to access things. That's important for my class. And if you're finding this through the podcast, then you already know about that. So sorry for the long intro. Um, I can show you some stuff, some cool stuff. So let's share that side by side, start. And I want to see what it looks like. Yep. So for example, this is the website. hilljay.net. It'll take you, that's all you need to put in there. It'll take you there. And you click the podcast button, and then there's all the episodes listed. And so this is the one that I'm recording right now, actually. I've got the page there, but I don't know how many there will be in this series. Um, but yeah, if you're a student in one of my classes right now, this should be really helpful for you because we were doing things very different from this before now. Okay. Um, And this RSS 2.0 button down here at the bottom, that will download a file. If anybody clicks that, it downloads a file onto your computer because it doesn't open a new page. You can see in the bottom left, it's hilljay.net/feed/podcast. And it's just a text file. Apparently files don't need extensions. Um, an extension on Windows just tells Windows what software to use to open the file. So you'll want different software for different kinds of files with different formatting and different encoding. Um, but a plain text file is just text, right? And that's what this is. That's what the RSS feed is. It's a set of code blocks that have all the links to the files for the audio files for the podcast. They have links. Well, it has tags for all the information that gets filled into the podcast description feeds. And there's some code on my end that um, most of it's automated, most of it's through other people who had really great tutorials. And it's pretty much all free. I just pay for the username, the domain name every year. But if I wanted to have it just through GitHub, I could have it for $0 a year. Um, and if I understand correctly, I have an old laptop that I want to turn into a server when the files get too big. Um, I should be able to run the website on that computer and then have like a domain host where I buy my domain name, have it route like hillj.net to that physical computer. Um, it's just that right now it's routing it to GitHub pages where it's being hosted for free up to a certain size. And yeah, that's kind of the back end of stuff. Um, I'm really happy with it. I I turned 30 in a few days, and I've been telling everybody. I'm sure everybody already knows by now. So it feels good. Feels sturdy. Let's dig into Plato. Um, and we're looking at a little bit of the text from books 6 and 7. Um, and the questions we have today, we're going to work on three things that kind of go together and in sequence. Um, you could say that they're all about the good, the one universal good. If monotheistic religions would probably call this God, there are a lot of similarities about the absolute goodness of the one. And there are a lot of ways that Platonism and Neoplatonism were read back into the monotheistic traditions through the versions of Plato and Aristotle that were rediscovered um, by or through Islamic cultures who were still reading them. I say rediscovered, they were never lost for them, right? But the Greeks lost them, um, Christians lost them. I think Judaism lost it as, I don't know. Um, because Maimonides, that's uninformed. I'm really bad with medieval philosophy. Um, what I can say is that there's, you know, plenty to be read about Platonism, Neoplatonism, and monotheism. And I'm not going to dig in more than that here. We can really just talk about Platonism because Plato does a lot to talk about the good, the one. Yeah. So we're going to look at two analogies and one allegory. We're going to look at the analogy of the sun. It's the first one. And then the second piece is the analogy of the divided line. And the third one is the most famous one, which is the allegory of the cave. It's a great video by, I don't think it's copywritten, and I do believe it's, yep. So Plato's Allegory of the Cave, narrated by Orson Welles. Um, I'm not going to pull that up on this Zoom because I'm not going to put a YouTube video inside of that's going to cause issues. Some kind of copyright thing is going to get triggered from that. But you know where to find it at the end, and that's from the 70s, I think. It's like 10 minutes long. I watched it. I've shown it to all my classes. It's been 10 sections now, and it's just classic. It's a good visualization. We'll also read the allegory together, but depending on how many episodes this series ends up being, um, if you're in one of my online sections, I'll actually put that at a certain moment. Okay. Um, there's also a very large section at the end of, or in the second half of the majority of book 7, really. That's not so much about the cave as it is about the proper instruction of the philosopher ruler, mathematics, astronomy, geometry. I'm kind of fuzzy on that section, honestly. Um, but I haven't decided if we'll read it. I think we will because it's really important to the dialectic. There's especially some stuff about summoners, things that produce contradictory sensory reports, and so they require you to be confused and kind of bring more of your energy to resolve the contradiction and the tension in order to understand properly. So they awaken the intellect and the understanding. I think that's useful. And something at the end of book 7 about how if you teach children or young students to practice the dialectic, which is a back and forth critique and a flexibility of understanding, um, and like deconstruction and dismantling certain perspectives. If you teach that too early on, before there's a genuine belief in the pursuit of truth and the possibility of objective truth and the possibility of knowing, then you just have confused sophists and Pharisees. You have people manipulating truth who don't really understand it and sit convicted in their own knowingness, so to speak. Um, but yeah, these sections, the analogy of the sun and the analogy of the divided line are short enough that we can kind of cover. I ran through all three in my class, and so we'll read the text for each one as we go, basically. I'm not going to try to give them all up front. I'll go ahead and give the form of or the analogy of the sun. We can go to Holy Terrain Art on the Instagram and look at some very, very old whiteboard posts, which have some good images. This is a plug for using some kind of ad block extension in your computer. Um, except this guy is bugging. Okay. Way back here, some really great drawings of flowers. The There we go. Um, Beautiful, right? So Plato says that the sun relates to us in three kind of ways, I guess is the best way to say that. Um, First, light or the sun is what makes the sense of sight possible. So, unlike other senses, you need some kind of external thing. This is what Plato says, some kind of external thing to make sight possible. Without light, it doesn't matter if you have the capacity or the ability to see, and there actually is something to be seen, and there is color out there to be seen, or something. If there's no light, if there's no sun, you can't see. He doesn't take into account sound waves and how those have to travel along a medium, or they are in some way the medium, a wider medium being transformed within itself. Uh, since even the particles that the waves travel along themselves are waves in a different state at the quantum level. Anyway, back to Plato's example, which is much more simple because he doesn't know these things. Um, he just didn't have the instruments. The sun makes sight possible, but it also gives plants and other life their energy. So it's a precondition in two different ways. It's a precondition for the perception or the knowability of things, but it's also a precondition and therefore like the accessibility. So like access, perception, and knowability, the ability of things. But then he says it's basically also responsible for their existence in the first place too. So that things exist at all is the growth, the second part. And then that we can know that they exist is the first part, the way that the sun gives sight. Um, and then third, he says that we can study the sun as an astronomical object in its own right. And so just like that, the good plays those three roles for us as well. The good makes all it gives us our existence. That's the second part, the growth. It also makes it possible for us to do anything or know anything or be anything, to move and relate. And we can study the good as an object in its own right, which is what philosophy and Platonism does. Um, Now, Plato is transcendental by most eminent readings. He is an archetype of transcendental thought. The forms the one universal, perfect, good form, determines everything else and gives everything else its justification. They must adhere to it. They do adhere to it. They would not live without it. Very hierarchical. Um, so he doesn't have a lot of an emphasis on process, but he's pretty flexible. In the next analogy, the analogy of the divided line, there's a move from, just like in Bergson that we read earlier, there's a move from partial perceptions of objects at multiple perspectives, from multiple perspectives at multiple times, that kind of thing. And eventually he says that once you get those images, those like your imagination is literally imaging from one perspective. And once you get multiple perspectives of something, then you have a belief in the object itself. So there's kind of an integration, like we saw with Bergson, from static objects or static partials to some kind of consummate whole that you have an intuition of directly or something. Um, but unlike the process, unlike process philosophy, he still wants objects and he wants static things, universal objective objects like justice existing, actually existing somewhere, something, somehow. And you can have grounds without them being objects like that. In immanence, you have adumbrations and singularizations instead, singularities. Each new desk adumbrates onto the previous desks you've seen to continually concatenate and expand your unfolding understanding of what a desk can be. It's not that every desk participates in some universal form that you're born with. Basically, again, this is rationalism versus empiricism. Are you born with an understanding of things that you find in the world mathematically or categorically, or are you um, born with nothing and you kind of fed all this information? So this follows similar contrasts. Like again, this is Platonic transcendentalism versus later immanent affect theory, which also maps onto rationalism versus empiricism, the one versus the many. Um, and largely internalism versus externalism when it comes to epistemic justification and the production of consciousness, especially. Um, that's kind of the consequences of getting wrapped up in a transcendental model. But these movements of integration and the divided line model and the analogy of the divided line, they really take us in positive directions, especially with the final step, because we don't get stuck at concepts and thought, we go to dialectical understanding. This will make more sense once we start reading. So I've jumped ahead of things with trying to explain, um, trying to hop into transcendentalism versus immanent, immanence, which is another topic. Um, well, let's go to the text. And the question here is, we're going back to the analogy of the sun. And the question here is, how does the form of the good illuminate experience? Um, I'm going to start on page 1126, which if you're in one of my classes, I don't think I've provided you with this page. You don't really need it, but it's kind of a little bit more context that I think will hit while we're doing it together. Um, all right. Furthermore, you certainly know that the majority believe that pleasure is the good. So they're trying to determine what the good is, and they want Socrates to tell them about it. While the more sophisticated believe that it is knowledge, that the good is knowledge. Indeed, I do. I do know this. And you know that those who believe this can't tell us what sort of knowledge it is, however, but in the end are forced to say that it is knowledge of the good. And that's ridiculous. Before I forget, um, in both Plato and Aristotle, pretty much in ancient philosophy, well, at least in Plato and Aristotle, in my readings of them, there's a emphasis on henosis, 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 which just means participation, kind of like mystical communion or participate. Let's avoid participation. Mystical communion with the absolute. So by studying the good or thinking about the good or talking about the good, amongst philosophers in the dialectic, um, you are doing the best thing you could possibly doing because you are unifying yourself and kind of uh, appendaging yourself onto the good by taking up its form or its vehicle as the focal point of your perception and the best way you could spend your time. That's henosis. It comes back up in Descartes, in my reading of Descartes, where it that participation or that adherence to or that unification with, that communion with the good or the one is what, when you apprehend the good, you apprehend a perception of knowingness. So clarity and distinctness in Descartes and eidetics in general then are a henosis with the good. And that's what knowing is. Okay, I'm just repeating things. Um, And that's ridiculous. Of course it is. They blame us for not knowing the good and then turn around and talk to us as if we did know it. They say that it is knowledge of the good, as if we understood what they're speaking about when they utter the word good. That's completely true. What about those who define the good as pleasure? Are they any less full of confusion than the others? Aren't even they forced to admit that there are bad pleasures? Most definitely. So I think they have to agree that the same things are both good and bad. Isn't that true? Of course. It's clear then. So that'll come back up with the mean in Aristotle, where the middle ground, and we're doing Plato right now, right? But where the middle ground or the middle way in Buddhism too is often, well, is always the appropriate choice. And there's always some different middle appropriate to the person and the context, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The same things are both good and bad. Isn't that true? Of course. It's clear then, isn't it, why there are many large controversies about this. How could it be otherwise? And isn't this also clear in the case of just and beautiful things? Many people are content with what are believed to be so, even if they aren't really so, and they act, acquire, and form their own beliefs on that basis. Nobody is satisfied to acquire things that are merely believed to be good, however, but everyone wants the things that really are good and disdains mere belief here. That's right. Every soul pursues the good and does whatever it does for its sake. It divines that the good is something, but it is perplexed and cannot adequately grasp what it is or acquire the sort of stable beliefs it has about other things, and so it misses the benefit, if any, that even those other things may give. Will we allow the best people in the city to whom we entrust everything to be so in the dark about something of this kind and of this importance? That's the last thing we do. I don't suppose, at least, that just and fine things will have acquired much of a guardian in someone who doesn't even know in what way they are good. And I divine that no one will have adequate knowledge of them until he knows this. You've divined well. But won't our constitution be perfectly ordered if a guardian who knows these things is in charge of it? Necessarily. So it's a political work still. But Socrates, you must also, or um, a psychological work, depending on how you read the Republic. But Socrates, and also how you read personhood, individual versus entangled with a community and a world and a city. But Socrates, you must also tell us whether you consider the good to be knowledge or pleasure or something else altogether. So that's why it was important for us to read the page before. What a man. It's been clear for some time that other people's opinions about these matters wouldn't satisfy you. Well, Socrates, it doesn't seem right to me for you to be willing to state other people's convictions but not your own, especially when you've spent so much time occupied with these matters. What, do you think it's right to talk about things one doesn't know as if one does know them? Not as if one knows them, he said, but one ought to be willing to state one's opinions as such. What? Haven't you noticed that opinions without knowledge are shameful and ugly things? The best of them are blind. Or do you think that those who express a true opinion without understanding are any different from blind people who happen to travel the right road? So I guess this is just ableism. Maybe I'm stupid to be so hesitant to call it that. But I'm pretty sure it is. There's other ways to get at his point that basically you could say the best of them are uninformed. He's using a metaphor, but blind people aren't uninformed. They're differently abled, and they're usually highly abled in the things that they do have still. Um, it's not like they have dampened perception or they have less attention to distribute. They distribute it in other places. So, yeah, got to mention that here before we move on. There's some sexism in Plato too. I think we already went over that though. Yay. They're no different. Do you want to look at shameful, uninformed and crooked things then, when you might hear illuminating and fine ones from other people? By God, Socrates, Glaucon said, don't desert us with the end almost in sight. We'll be satisfied if you discuss the good as you discuss justice, moderation, and the rest. That, my friend, I said, would satisfy me too, but I'm afraid that I won't be up to it, and that I'll disgrace myself and look ridiculous by trying. So let's abandon the quest for what the good itself is for the time being, for even to arrive at my own view about it is too big a topic for the discussion we are now started on. But I am willing to tell you about what is apparently an offspring of the good and most like it. Is that agreeable to you, or would you rather we let the whole matter drop? All right, so then he's going to talk about taxes and children. And I guess the Greek word for both of them is really similar. And so he's kind of making a joke about that. Um, it is. The story about the father remains a debt you'll pay another time. So there's kind of the start of the joke. Um, and the son will be the offspring of the good because we can't really access the good directly. I wish that I could pay the debt in full and you receive it instead of just the interest. So here then is this child and offspring of the good. But be careful that I don't somehow deceive you unintentionally by giving you an illegitimate account of the child. And really the reason it's not the good itself is because just like in intuition, you have to go to it yourself. You have to have the eidetic perception. You have to engage with it. It has to hit. It hits in different ways at different times in your life, depending on what you've been through. Um, we'll be as careful as possible, so speak on. I will when we've come to an agreement and recalled some things that we've already said both here and many other times. Which ones? Um, that Greek word is tokos, which means either child or interest, I believe, the interest on capital. We say that there are many beautiful things and many good things, and so on for each kind, and in this way we distinguish them in words. We do. And beauty itself and good itself, and all the things that we thereby set down as many, reversing ourselves, we set down according to a single form of each, believing that there is but one, and call it the being of each. That's true. And we say that the many beautiful things and the rest are visible, but not intelligible, while the forms are intelligible but not visible. That's completely true. With what part of ourselves do we see visible things? With our sight. And so audible things are heard by hearing, and with our other senses we perceive all the other perceptible things. That's right. Have you considered how lavish the maker of our senses was in making the power to see and be seen? I can't say I have. Well, consider it this way. Do hearing and sound need another kind of thing in order for the former to hear and the latter to be heard? A third thing, in whose absence the one won't hear and the other be heard? No, they need nothing else. Like I said, they don't know about waves and having a bounce between atoms in the air. And if there are any others that need such a thing, there can't be many of them. Can you think of one? I can't. You don't realize that sight and the visible have such a need. How so? Sight may be present in the eyes, and the one who has it may try to use it, and the colors may be present in things. But unless a third kind of thing is present, which is naturally adapted for this very purpose, you know that sight will see nothing and the colors will remain unseen. What kind of thing do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? I mean what you call light. You're right. Then it isn't an insignificant kind of link that connects the sense of sight and the power to be seen. It is a more valuable link than any other link things have got, if indeed light is something valuable. And of course, it's very valuable. Which of the things, which of the gods in heaven would you name as the cause and controller of this? The one whose light causes our sight to see in the best way and the visible things to be seen. The same one you and others would name, obviously. Duh. The answer to your question is the sun. And isn't sight by nature related to that God in this way? Which way? New way with Hudis. It's going so slow. Um, Sight isn't the sun, neither sight itself nor that in which it comes to be, namely the eye. No, it certainly isn't. But I think it is the most sun-like of the senses, very much so. And it receives from the sun the power it has, just like an influx from an overflowing treasury. Certainly. The sun is not sight, but isn't it the cause of sight itself and seen by it? That's right. Let's say then that this is what I call the offspring of the good, which the good begot as its analog. What the good itself is in the intelligible realm. Hold on. Sorry. Sorry about that. Winchester gets skin issues from uh licking himself too much whenever he gets like hot spots. And so I had to tell him to stop. Um, what the good itself is in the intelligible realm in relation to understanding and intelligible things, the sun is in the visible realm in relation to sight and visible things. So there's a dualism here too. Um, there are many theories of empiricism or theories of eminence that are purely multiple or even purely monistic. Um, but some of them set up their monism as a dualism, or they set up their monism as a differentiation that's simultaneously unity multiple. And ultimately, the dialectic has to be able to take up all the different perspectives and experiences that everyone's ever had to come to what Spinoza calls subspecie eternitatis from the perspective of the eternal. So, what is the understanding of the truth of things in all the flowing and all the causation and relation? Anyway, how? Explain a bit more. You know that when we turn our eyes to things whose colors are no longer in the light of day, but in the gloom of night, the eyes are dimmed and seem nearly blind, as if clear vision were no longer in them. Of course. Yet whenever one turns them on things illuminated by the sun, They see clearly, and vision appears in those very same eyes. Indeed, will understand the soul in the same way. When it focuses on something illuminated by truth and what is, it understands, knows, and apparently possesses understanding. It's just kind of like a mapping onto or latching onto a truth that's already there. It's not that we become it or do it. And what is, it understands, knows, and apparently possesses understanding. But when it focuses on what is mixed with obscurity, on what comes to be and passes away, this transitory process of the world, which is less real for Plato than the universal forms or the static eternal objects. It opines, which means makes or forms or has opinions, opinionates, and is dimmed, changes its opinions this way and that, and seems bereft of understanding. It does seem that way. I mean, the thing is, all of that thrashing in the obscurity it is the dialectic, and it produces the philosopher or the mental perspective capable of attaining truth. It's a sort of practice. So that what gives truth to the things known and the power to know to the knower is the form of the good. And though it is the cause of knowledge and truth, it is also an object of knowledge. Both knowledge and truth are beautiful things, but the good is other and more beautiful than they. In the visible realm, light and sight are rightly considered sun-like, but it is wrong to think that they are the sun. So here it is right to think of knowledge and truth as good alike, but wrong to think that either of them is the good, for the good is yet more prized. This is an inconceivably beautiful thing you're talking about. If good provides both knowledge and truth, and is superior to them in beauty, you surely don't think that a thing like that could be pleasure. Hush. Let's examine its image in more detail as follows. How? You'll be willing to say, I think, that the sun not only provides visible things with the power to be seen, but also with coming to be, growth, and nourishment, although it is not itself coming to be. How could it be? Therefore, you should also say that not only do the objects of knowledge owe their being known to the good, but their being is also due to it. So that's that second thing. Although the good is not being, but superior to it in rank and power. So the ability for us to know things and also the existence of the truths in the first place, and also the good is a thing we can study as its own thing. Those are the three components of the analogy of the sun. We'll probably wrap after the sun and go to a new episode for the analogy of the divided line. And yeah, we'll see how many are in this series. I'll just read it again from the top. Therefore, you should also say that not only do the objects of knowledge owe their being known to the good, but their being is also due to it. Oh, the good is not being, but superior to it in rank and power. And Glaucon comically said, by Apollo, what is a monic superiority? It's your own fault. You forced me to tell you my opinion about it. And I don't want you to stop either, so continue to explain its similarity to the sun, if you've omitted anything. I'm certainly omitting a lot. Well, don't. Not even the smallest thing. I think I'll have to omit a fair bit, but as far as is possible at the moment, I won't omit anything voluntarily. Don't. Understand then that, as we said, there are these two things, one sovereign of the intelligible kind in place, the other of the visible. I don't say of heaven, so there was the good and the sun, respectively. I don't say of heaven so as not to seem of you to be playing the sophist, um, or the trickster with words, playing the sophist with the name. In any case, you have two kinds of things, visible and intelligible. Right. It is like a line divided into two unequal sections, and that, folks, is where we'll wrap. That's the beginning of the analogy of the divided line. So we'll pop back up to the paragraph before and restart there when we get back into it. It'll take a minute for the Zoom video to process. I might think about eating a little bit more dinner, getting some water, those kinds of things. Um, Winchester, dog tax coming up. end cards probably already on the screen. Here, boy. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for listening. Um, you enjoy. Come here. Come up here. They want to see you. Come on. Get up here. It's a little bit more cramped in this space, but yeah. Boy. No. Bye. All right. See you in a bit.